up on Dialogue Weekend. New data show China's economy has started to grow again as the country rebounds from coronavirus. Can its efforts help speed up global recovery? A New York Times opinion writer resigns, citing an environment of hostility, intolerance, and ideological division. And this week's newsmaker. Now, on Dialogue Weekend.
Welcome to Dialogue Weekend. I'm Vshaped. China's economy has recorded strong growth in the second quarter, which offers a glimmer of hope that life will come back to normal as long as COVID-19 can be kept under control. Now the focus is shifting to the second half of the year, whether the economic expansion will continue and what are the challenges ahead for the world's second largest economy. For that, we'll talk to Claire Pearson, chair of the China-Britain Belt and Road Chamber, and Chu Qiang, assistant director of the International Monetary Institute of Renmin University of China. So welcome to the show. Claire, China's GDP expanded by 3.2% year-on-year in the second quarter. Compare that number to 6.8% contraction in the first quarter. So that's really something. Is this the V-shaped rebound that was hoped for?
Hi, Shindor. Thank you very much for having me on the show tonight. Yeah, I think we can say it's certainly a V, it's not a V-shape. And some people are surprised about this. I'm not very surprised. I've been in Beijing for the last 6 months, and I've been in the office every day. Because of China's track, trace, isolate strategy, we've been able to work, and I am busy. If you are a foreigner and you're in China today, you are busy. So I agree, 3.2% is very believable. And I've noticed that there's new policies, there's new sectors, there's new geographies that are being promoted by the Chinese government. And certainly we're seeing clients do 3 things. They're adapting their old company, they're adapting their own business model, then they're integrating their team, they're finding out new ways to work together, and then they're elevating their entire business by incorporating what I would call ESG aspects, environment, social governance aspects. So these 3 areas, adapt, integrate, and elevate, rebuild on higher ground. That's what you do after the flood. And this is what Chinese companies are doing so well. I'll give you an example. When COVID broke out, I was actually in Kuala Lumpur. I was with a client whose family were in Wuhan. So he was selling drones in Malaysia, and they were agricultural drones for increasing crop yield. But when Corona hit, he was on his phone watching his wife and kid and his mother in Wuhan. Was he motivated to adapt, innovate, elevate his business strategy? Yes, he was. Soon he had those drones and mini robots spraying ambulances. So he created a completely new business stream during COVID to adapt to the new world. It's not 2019. Whatever company you're in, you've got to adapt to the new world.
That's right. Chu Qiang, so how do you make of these numbers? 3.2% second quarter, and sharp contrast to the contraction in the first quarter, right?
Yes, we are looking at a very, very strong rally of the economy right now. I mean, if you're a foreigner, if you have a chance right now to come to China, you just take your own eyes and just look on the street and shopping malls and restaurants and everything, you will find out the reason why. Because Chinese government has already steadily controlled the coronavirus pandemic. So right now we have created a very friendly environment for the economy recovery. So basically right now we're seeing that the whole society has been recovered economically. And you can see people going out on shopping, go to the shopping mall, go to the restaurants, and consumption has already. And also the Chinese government has injected a lot of incentives in the market. It's like providing low interest rate loans for the market players. And also government itself has been putting into a lot of investment on infrastructure and construction. So I think all these reasons contribute to the current situation we've been watching at. And we're thinking this momentum will be maintained in the second half of the year.
Well, as you said, of course, the Chinese government introduced a series of policies to offset and to support, for example, hard-hit enterprises, stabilize employment, and boost domestic demand. As you pointed out, in these factors, these areas, there are corresponding policies, but are they equally effective in their own areas?
Well, I do think they have very different. They do have very different contribution to the economy. I think recently, well, what we're looking at from a professional view, we're looking at economic crisis, like I mentioned last time. It's not a financial crisis like we used to, see like in 1997 or 2008. Financial crisis means the prices of the financial product or assets is been dropping, and then it dragged all the economy into the sink. But economic crisis means something else. It means the sharp decrease in both supply side and the demand side, which means people are staying at home, nobody's going to consume, nobody's going to produce. This is something we haven't been seeing for many, many years. Last memory of human beings' economic crisis in 1929. So in 1929, what does the government do to save that crisis? I think President Roosevelt of the USA has created something called New Deal. New Deal means the government has to step in to put the money in and to build infrastructures, big constructions, so people can have a job. Because they have a job, they can have a salary. Because they have a salary, they can go shopping again. So government is like the last resort of liquidities. They put the money back into people's hands, put the job back into people's hands, and then the economy starts to running again. Because with this down payment of the investment, and then we can see after infrastructure, and then we see the consumption also been revived. So this is the situation right now. I think Chinese government has to put more stress on infrastructure and construction, so we can maintain the basic number of our economy. And then most of the people and most of the companies in the supply chain will still have a job, will still have income, and so the consumption will not be shrinking so bad. So this is the situation right now we're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Well, industrial production grew 4.4% year-on-year in the second quarter, contrasting that with 8.4% decline in the first quarter. Again, strong growth in this economic indicator. So, Claire, there's also, of course, people who are casting doubts about the revival of the Chinese economy. They say the Chinese government is again using the old tools by invest in the infrastructure section to boost economic growth. Do you agree?
Look, I think whatever tools you've got in the box, you've got to use them now. We're in a completely different game. We're in a different world order. And new problems need new answers. And I think China is doing something really unusual. I mean, I don't think the outside world understands how easy it is to travel here. I've just come back from a business trip to Hainan, which is the new free trade port in China. I got the flight from Beijing to Haikou, the capital of Hainan. That flight was full. Did I feel nervous on that flight? I did not, because I'd had to go and have a corona test before I took the flight. When I arrived at the airport, I downloaded a QR to show my track and trace that I hadn't been in contact with anyone who had the virus. So people can be focused on business because their brain isn't divided by worry about contagion. And this is China's big win in the last 3 months, is its containment of the virus, its rapid response, and its thorough ongoing updating of people's travel strategy. So this means that I can get a high-speed train to Shanghai in 4 hours and do business there. I can go to Hainan and work there for a week, setting up new businesses in the new low-tax economy. So people aren't constrained here. And we've got 1.4 billion people on our doorstep in China. So if the world's going to stop moving, it's not a bad place to be. And also Beijing, it's got the money, it's got the diplomats, and it's got the market. I cycle 2 hours to work to make sure that I have a lot of endorphins in my body, because now we're in a survival economy.
That's
You've
right.
got to survive, and you've got to survive economically and physically.
Exactly.
And China's good at that.
Not the time probably to be picky, in what way, in what creative way to revive the economy.
Do what you like.
Yeah.
6.8 million migrants went back to Guangdong. The factories are all working. My friends in Ningbo, Shandong, Guangdong, they're all churning stuff out. Yeah. We're working.
Yeah, speak of the employment, of course, there are still some challenges, at least it seems to be. Unemployment rate in urban areas stood at 5.7% in June, 0.2 percentage lower than that of May. So Chuqiang, still we have millions of college graduates facing a tough job market. How serious is that, and what need to be done to alleviate that situation?
Well, I think the employment problem or job problem is the common problem faced by all the government and all the countries. Well, we're really in a very unusual situation. In the current period of time, contemporarily, no human society has faced such kind of crisis like this before. So I think what we need to do is that the government really need to kick in, because without the government help, I don't think there is going to be enough job in the market if you let the market choose itself. Recently, we noticed that a lot of companies, it's a very interesting fact, a lot of companies started to borrow money, even though for the company who have very good cash flows, but they started to borrow money from the banks because that is low interest loans. Why do they have to do that? Because I asked a few of them, they say, okay, I'm not sure about the future. I feel a little bit uncertain about what it's going to be like in the next season. Is the COVID-19 come back? Do we will have the vaccine timely? We don't know about that. So as an enterprise, when the price is affordable, they will try to hoard as much of the loans or cash as they can, so they can top out all this uncertainty. So same situation happened in the employment market as well. So because they don't see the certainty of the future, so a lot of enterprises shrinked or froze their enrollment of the new crew members, of the new employment. So this is going to be a problem. So government really need to step in to tell the enterprises there is going to be a lot of relief packages, there's going to be a lot of help plans to help you to go through the uncertainties. So as an enterprise, don't hesitate. Just recruit people if you need them. And also, I should let the enterprises understand one thing is that even though right now we're facing a hard time, but still, you have to understand, human resources is still, or the talent is still the most important source of the enterprise. And now you are in, I would call it the golden bottom. There's a lot of very, very good talents out there in the market. They can accept a job with a much lower pay. So why don't you just hoard more of the human resources rather than just cash? Because cash wouldn't give you that much of a future, but human being will.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Of course, one way to create more business and more jobs is really to expand the business. So to continue reform and opening up, that's exactly the message it seems to be from President Xi Jinping. He said in a letter to representatives of Global CEO Council members that China will keep deepening reform and expanding opening up to provide a better business environment for investment and business development of both Chinese and foreign companies. So, Claire, what signal is the President sending, and what does this improvement in the Chinese economic situation mean to the rest of the world?
I think Xi Jinping is sending a consistent signal. I mean, I happened to see him speaking in 2016 at Hangzhou at G20. He didn't invite the regular people to G20. I mean, we had the regular sort of waspy crowd, but we also had a lot of Belt and Road countries, Southeast Asian nations there. He was opening the door. When I was in Beijing in 2006, I saw 51 African presidents attend the Forum on China and Africa in Beijing. When Xi Jinping spoke in Davos in January 2017, his was the multilateral speech. So I think Xi Jinping is just being consistent here. He's opening the markets. I'll give you some anecdotal evidence of how China has changed from the factory of the world to the investor in the world. Is a lot of people are trying to recruit foreign talents in China right now. Whereas before, global jobs used to happen in New York, DC, and London, global jobs on global boards that need to diversify are beginning to be recruited for in Beijing.
Well,
why is that? Because Xi Jinping's opening the door to finance and to insurance companies. So it's a different world.
That's right. That's a great change, I mean, in the Chinese landscape. Well, let's move on to the United States. In 2016, the New York Times, like many other news outlets in the States, failed to foresee the victory of Donald Trump. To try to better represent and understand their own country, they decided to bring in different voices to their opinion pages, hence the recruitment of Barry Weiss. Her recent resignation with a scathing critic of the Times work environment has created a huge controversy in news circle. However, the incident goes beyond a personal matter as it takes place in a time of cultural clashes between the right and the left, the rise of the cancel culture and the woke generation, as well as how to use Twitter. To find out more, we are joined by Rick Denham, former White House correspondent for Business Week. So, Claire, let's continue with you. So who is Barry Weiss? I mean, she's a controversial figure, I mean, by herself, isn't she?
I've got to be honest, Barry Weiss interests me. I mean, she's a 36-year-old woman. She's brought up in Pittsburgh. She's got working class parents. She's got herself to school. She's gone to work for an NGO in the Middle East. And then she said something that's put her foot in it with the boss. Reminds me a bit of myself. You know, but what I'm sorry about Barry is that she's quit rather than sit. I mean, how difficult do you think it is to employ somebody like Barry? Jews in America, they're 2% of the population. She's not exactly 2.4 kids in the suburbs, is she? Well, employers have to get used to that. The problem for people like Barry, they walk into an editorial meeting, and guess what? Everyone's not like them. And I think that in the New World Order, the companies that can appreciate diversity, that can listen to people who disagree, and rather than get upset, get educated, are going to be the winners. I mean, Barry and...
But obviously there will be problems of, you know, like, you know, if you look at her resignation letter, it's like she's complaining, you know, herself somehow living in a mean girl club, you know, being mistreated by her colleagues, probably. So here, Rick, in her resignation letter, Weiss wrote that, quote, "The lessons that ought to have followed the election, lessons about the importance of understanding other Americans, the necessity of resisting tribalism, and the centrality of the free exchange of ideas to a democratic society have not been learned. And instead, there's a new consensus that truth isn't a process of a collective discovery, but an orthodoxy already known to an enlightened few, whose job is to inform everyone else." That's a damning accusation against the New York Times. Does she have a point here?
Well, I think it's a point of view. I'm not sure that it's a legitimate point. Yes, the New York Times is a liberal publication. It always has been. I think that the issue right now in the United States is that so much of media is partisan, and so many news consumers go to a place where they feel comfortable, where they read opinions that match their own. I think that her resignation letter, while well written, was long on accusations and short on evidence. I mean, I didn't see any specific examples of intimidation, of mean girl culture, of any of the things that you mentioned in there. So I think it's a subject that's important to discuss in American media, in the free press culture of being able to have your voice. But I think it's more that she feels intimidated than there was evidence that she was that she was an outcast within the publication.
Mm-hmm. Also, in the letter, Weiss, mentioned about the Twitter, saying that Twitter is not on the masthead of the New York Times, but Twitter has become its ultimate editor. So the use of Twitter seems to be also part of the problem, not only probably with the New York Times, but also with, I guess, other media outlets or the cultural scene.
I agree. Yeah. I agree with you fully. I agree with her on this point. I mean, I had an example this week. where I was personally attacked on Twitter for supposedly being a lackey of the Communist Party of China because I appear on a Chinese state TV, like this show. You have to have a thick skin. Twitter is wide open to opinions, and it's opinions in America. It's opinions of people from China, bots from Russia. You have attacks all the time, and even inside of Twitter, people do criticize others within their publications, which used to be unheard of. When I was a bureau chief in Washington, when I was a White House correspondent, you didn't publicly disagree with somebody else in your publication. Twitter is intimidating. Twitter is not at all what it was when it was created in 2007, 2008. I did some of the first journalism training at the National Press Club in Washington on how journalists could use Twitter. We had no idea that it would be used the way it is right now, just to hurl out accusations without evidence, to attack people personally, to have intimidation campaigns. So I think she has a point there, but I think that it's different than the New York Times culture. I think you need to have separate discussions of the culture of the New York Times and of this cancel culture and Twitter flame wars that are out there all the time.
Well, that's the point. You know, Barry White's resignation also follows James Bennett, who was also the paper's opinion editor. You know, Claire, what can we learn from the resignations? You know, both White's resignation and also the Bennett's resignation. You know, it happened actually in about 3 months. Oh, that's
I think it's completely entertaining. I've worked in corporates for 25 years. It's completely normal. And people always disagree. One's from Pittsburgh, one's from DC. Let's face it, the editor, I mean, he's inherited that job from his dad. He's 39 and the family's owned it since 1851. She's a girl who's rocked in from the wrong side of the tracks, and probably they don't meet each other on Saturday and Sunday at you know, middle-class social parties. Forget what happens at work, it's what happens at the weekend. There's where the real bonds are formed, where people are promoted or demoted. Of course, and don't just look what people are saying, look where they're sitting. Have you talked to many sane people who've just been through 3 months of lockdown? Because when I'm on Zoom to the US, I'm not speaking to many sane people. It's a very difficult time for people right now. People are on edge, and it spills over at work. Because you don't have those de-escalation moments in the pub on Friday where you can say, oh, you know when I conflicted with you on what happened vis-a-vis a certain geopolitical issue? I didn't really mean it. Can I buy you a G&T and can we just talk about family things? The social massage of, you know, general discourse isn't happening to de-escalate professional tensions, which are inevitable during a time of geopolitical change. I mean, how difficult do you think it is for a Chinese boss to employ me? Difficult. I heard him saying the other day to a client, he said, I've worked with Claire for 10 years, and frankly, it is a miracle. And, you know, I put my hand up and say thank you to that Chinese boss. Because speaking with somebody who speaks the wrong language, eats the wrong food, and turns up for meetings at the wrong time, it's frankly difficult. Diversity is difficult. And it's particularly difficult during the corona environment. So give each other a break. These two, I mean, they're only 39 and 36. They'll live to tell the tale. They'll get another job, particularly if they've got a big Twitter profile. So, you know, leave them alone. These are kids.
Okay, we all need to be a bit relaxed, probably.
Yeah, relax about
yeah, let's leave it there for now and then take a look at this week's Newsmaker. Well, we all know who he is. If you take a look at Fauci recently, he has been under attack. For example, Peter Navarro, the top trade advisor to President Trump, described Fauci as wrong about everything in an op-ed article in USA Today on Sunday. Another, actually, Trump's close advisor posted a Facebook a rendering that likened Fauci to a faucet drowning Uncle Sam. So, Rick here, what is behind the rising criticism from the government against Fauci, the top scientist against the coronavirus here?
Well, first, I find it completely self-destructive. What's behind it is that Dr. Fauci has been a voice of truth and a voice of reason, and he's disagreed with some of the bizarre statements that have come out of the president, some of the miracle cures, the president's claims that this was all going away, and that we should immediately reopen schools and reopen the economy. He's been a voice of medicine. He's been a voice of truth, and truth doesn't necessarily succeed in the Trump administration. But I think the biggest sin of all is that he has higher ratings than the president. There was a Quinnipiac poll this week. 67% of Americans trust what they hear from Fauci, while 65%, I'm sorry, it's the opposite. 65% of Americans believe what they hear from Fauci. 67% do not believe what they hear from Trump about the coronavirus. And that's the biggest sin, that he not only disagrees, but that people believe him and not the president.
So that will make him probably more unpopular with the Trump government.
Yeah, I think they want to knock him down a bit to hurt his credibility. The president has stopped listening to him. He doesn't talk to Fauci anymore. He doesn't have him in briefings with the president. And what you can see is on Fox News, which is the equivalent of the Trump News Network, there's a lot of criticism of Fauci. Fauci made mistakes. Everybody made mistakes. WHO made mistakes. We're learning about this disease still, but the difference is that Fauci has acknowledged where he was wrong, and he continues to go with the latest science, while Donald Trump, in his own mind, is never wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, Claire, Fauci also urged an end to the divisiveness over the country's response to the pandemic, saying that let's stop this nonsense and focus on the virus. This is common sense, right?
Yeah, Fauci's a sort of roll-up-your-sleeves medic. He's an immunologist. I mean, he's born in Brooklyn. He's a tough guy. But he's an academic as well. He manages to balance pragmatism with professionalism. And the problem for Fauci, he's become a bit of an icon. He's done a Diana. He's done a Lady Diana. I saw him on the front of In Style magazine this week. I mean, the guy's gone way beyond medicine now. And, one mountain can't hold two tigers, as the Chinese say. And during a pandemic, you've got to learn when to be when to be the bride and when to be the bridesmaid. It's like we're at war at the moment. And normally, when you have a war, you have people with lots of stars here. 5-star generals making pronouncements about when we're going to invade some poor country. But now we need to be having a doctor. Fauci is your 5-star general of medicine. He's done AIDS, he's done Ebola, he's done Corona, he's done it all. That guy has been in immunology since 1984. And when he was a kid and his dad ran the pharmacy, he delivered the prescriptions to the patients. You can't mess with Fauci. Well, history will be the judge.
Thank you.
But frankly, I wouldn't take him on.
Thank you, Claire, over there. Well, with that, we are coming to the end of the show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also watch us on the CGTN app or on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. You can find me on Twitter, Xu Qinduo. Thank you for your time. See you next week.